Hello my friends, today we have a bit unusual comparison because I will be comparing very popular camera and lens combination, the Sigma 18-35mm F1.8 DCH-SM with Sigma MC11 adapter mounted on Sony A6500 against Tamron 28-75mm F2.8 Di3RXD mounted on Sony A7III. The reason why I'm doing this is that a lot of people who use 18-35 on A6500 and want to upgrade to 7 Mark III were asking me what lens they should buy for A7 Mark III to replace their beloved Sigma 18-35 and whether they can get the same or better image quality as with 18-35. And my answer to that question is the Tamron 28-75mm F2.8. So in this video, we will take a look at how these combinations perform in comparison to each other. Sigma 18-35mm f1.8 DCH-SM is together with the 50-100mm version the sharpest zoom lens for the crop sensor cameras, and because it is still the only zoom lens with f1.8 aperture, it can also to large extent compensate for that 1.5 times crop factor of APS-C sensor. The Sigma gives you 27 to 52.5mm f2.7 full frame equivalent, so in terms of the depth of field and light gathering, it is very similar to Tamron 28 to 75mm f2.8. The Sigma is 1 full frame millimeter wider at the short end, but at the long end the Tamron gives you extra 22.5mm of reach, which makes the Tamron more useful as all-round lens. Regarding the build quality, the Tamron is made of plastics, only the mount is metal, but overall the build quality is actually decent, nothing moves inside of the lens, it feels solid. Again, I can't say that it feels premium, but the build quality is completely fine. On the Sigma, the rear part is made of metal, the zoom and focusing ring are metal and rubberized. The Sigma definitely feels premium, it is very solid, so the build quality is very good on that one. The Tamron is also weather sealed, there is a gasket around the mount. I don't know how good is the weather sealing and I'm not going to test it intentionally. I'm also sure that by now everybody is aware of that weather sealing issue with A7 Mark III, so there is no need to write another essay about that in the comments. Sigma 18-35 is not weather sealed. The zoom ring on the Sigma is extremely smooth, probably still the smoothest that I've ever tested. The focusing ring is also very smooth with good amount of resistance, and the manual focusing on this lens is also mechanical. You even have the distance scale on the lens, so it is pleasure to focus manually with Sigma 18-35. The zoom ring on my Tamron 28-75 has smoothened out a bit since I bought it, but you can still feel a bit of the friction between the plastic tubes. The manual focusing is done by wire, so the focusing ring is completely smooth, and it is actually one of the better focus by wire systems that I have tested. Despite that the Sigma covers shorter range with similar light gathering capabilities, it is a bit longer, significantly heavier, and the diameter is larger than on the Tamron as well, and that is without the adapter that you need to use with it. With the adapter it is even longer and heavier, and that in combination with small and light A6500 makes this setup extremely front heavy, which is why the handling of this combination is not very good, and it even requires pretty solid tripod and head to prevent it from tilting down. What helps a lot here is to use base plate or a cage. I use both depending on the situation. I have also made a review of small rig cage for A6500 and it will be linked in the description. The Tamron on the other hand feels completely fine on A7 Mark III. It is lighter and much shorter without an adapter. A7 Mark III also has deeper and longer grip, so balancing this combination is not a problem. Regarding the autofocus, before I will talk about the speed and accuracy, I have to mention the biggest difference in terms of autofocus, which is the noise. On the Tamron, the autofocus is very silent and the noise will not be picked up by in-camera mic or by shotgun mic, so that is alright. But on the Sigma, the autofocus is unfortunately very loud, and in-camera microphone or shotgun microphone is unusable with the Sigma. Even with external recording, the camera has to be quite far from the microphone. So if you want to record video with sound, the Sigma is only usable with manual focusing. The autofocus system in Tamron is very good. The autofocus works just as well as with native lens. So the autofocus is very fast and also very accurate. If you set it to normal or slow dry speed, it is also very smooth. All of the special modes like the face and eye detection work as well, so no complaints about the autofocus on the Tamron. The autofocus on Sigma is very good as well when using MC11 adapter. It is just as accurate as with native lenses. It is a bit slower, although that is not going to be a problem in video, and it stills, you will only notice that while tracking fast moving subjects. And now let's move on to the image quality. I'm not going to bore you too much with pixel peeping this time, and there is really no need to, because the image quality is really excellent on both. The Tamron has a lot easier job here because the A7 Mark III and A6500 have both 24 megapixel sensor, but the A6500 sensor has larger pixel density, so it is much more demanding on the lens sharpness, but even wide open at the widest angle at f1.8 and f2.8, both are sharp across the frame, and the sharpness is further increasing up to f5.6 on the Sigma, where it is extremely sharp across the frame, and on the Tamron the sharpest point is f8, where it is extremely sharp as well. On the Sigma you can basically use any aperture from f1.8 to f8 at any focal length, and the image quality will be excellent. On the Tamron the sharpness is also very uniform, up to about 50 millimeters. Towards the long end it gets just a bit softer, but it is still very sharp. Overall, I have no problem with the sharpness on either of these lenses. It is actually quite impossible to distinguish pictures shot with these lenses on A7 Mark III and A6500 by the sharpness. The contrast is also excellent on both. I really like the colors as well. When using Sigma 18-35 and also 16mm f1.4 on 6500, I have never had a problem with out-of-the-camera colors, even though the Sony has reputation of not having very nice colors, but I only change global parameters in post most of the time. A7 Mark III has a lot different color science, and here I can also say that the colors are very nice, no problem here either. Regarding the distortion and vignetting, Sigma doesn't have major problems with that. On Tamron the distortion and also vignetting is quite significant, but it can be removed by in-camera corrections. Now there is also lens correction profile available in the Lightroom, so that is not a problem. The chromatic aberration on Sigma is actually quite significant at the wide apertures, and it can't be fully fixed using the software, but after the corrections the amount won't be so bad that it would ruin your pictures. With Tamron, the chromatic aberration can be completely fixed using the software. I have heard some criticism of the rendering of out of focus background on the Tamron. This is quite difficult to evaluate, but I personally don't mind it. In my opinion it looks quite good, but you can see for yourself. On the Sigma the background looks very nice, in my opinion a bit better than on Tamron. Neither lens is stabilized, but both A7 Mark III and A6500 have stabilized sensor, so that helps a lot. The stabilization effect is a bit better on A7 Mark III, but neither is class leading, since both have to move large sensor inside small body, but the difference in comparison with having no in-body image stabilization at all is quite significant, and it is also quite important because it helps a bit with the jello effect caused by rolling shutter, which is more visible on A6500. Regarding the differences between the A7 Mark III and A6500, I have made a comparison video last week, it will also be linked in the description, but the conclusion is that A7 Mark III is better than A6500 in every way except for portability and the price. In some areas the improvement is huge, like in ISO performance, handling or battery life. In other areas the improvement is smaller, like with in-body image stabilization. The performance of A6500 in terms of the results that it can provide is already great, and the A7 Mark III takes it to the next level while fixing most of A6500's annoyances like the 4K screen dim, poor battery life and so on, which is why the A7 Mark III is a significant upgrade over A6500. Sigma 18-35 significantly minimizes the differences in image quality, and it can also provide so-called full-frame look by having great contrast and that f1.8 aperture. The A7 Mark III still has better dynamic range and color depth, so it is a bit better, but in the real world you won't see the difference. Sigma 18-35 unfortunately also neutralizes A6500 size advantage. The handling of this combination is quite poor, the focal range is probably too short to consider it an all-round lens, and there is also the loud autofocus, which significantly decreases the versatility of this lens. So the conclusion is that if you upgrade from A6500 with Sigma 18-35 to A7 Mark III with Tamron 28-75, your audience won't notice it much, but the upgrade in terms of user experience will be quite huge. So if the budget allows it, I definitely recommend Sony A7 Mark III with Tamron over A6500 with Sigma and adapter. So that's it for this video. Thank you for watching. I hope that you liked this video and that you found it to be useful. Stay tuned for more videos and maybe consider subscribing if you don't want to miss my future content. I appreciate your feedback in form of thumbs up or thumbs down. If you would like to ask anything or share your opinion, please do so in the comment section, and see you next time.